Everybody loves a bunch of flowers, and there's nothing nicer than a freshly picked bunch from your garden. Cutting gardens are all the rage now, but I prefer to grow mine mixed in with my vegetables. It's what I call my truggery. And the reason I like to mix the two is because I think visually they complement themselves. Nothing nicer than having kale mixed amongst your amaranthus and some dahlias and things like that. And also, although I'm not a firm believer in companion planting, there just has not been enough research done on it. Everybody agrees that flowers pull in beneficial insects like the hoverflies and things like that, and you get a better mix, and so you're less likely to suffer from mass attacks of whitefly or blackfly or whatever. So to mix them up, you extend your period of interest in your vegetable garden. You make your vegetable garden look even more beautiful, and then when you go out and cut your veg in the evening, you can also cut a few flowers to pop in a vase and put on the table while you eat your supper. So I think it's got many merits to mixing the two. I did see, though, a wonderful example of a pure cutting garden at Hampton Court Flower Show a few weeks ago. This is by Carien van Boxtel. She's taken her inspiration from the Dutch flower fields, so she's grown everything in lines. I love geometric designs, and lines work perfectly, and you've got this beautiful juxtaposition of different colours and different foliages. I see Gabriel Oak is the rose there, the repeat flowering English rose by David Austin, my uncle, and that is such a perfect colour. And what I find fascinating is the way she's put in trees. So you've got foliage within the planting. There's a hornbeam, Carpenter's speculus, hydrangeas in there. So there's all different things mixed up within the rose. And the whole point is to show that you can actually pick cut flowers from your garden from January to December. Obviously, to create the wow factor for July, here at Hampton Court, we've got things flowering now, but if this was for real, we'd have more things like eucalyptus. Eucalyptus is a fabulous shrub. My mother used to grow flowers for cutting in her nursery, and then every time she went down to London, she'd just take a van full of eucalyptus foliage, and she had about 20 different eucalyptus types, and they sell like hot cakes, and it's so easy to grow. You just have a shrub, and every time you cut it, then more grow back. So you have real continuity, and you can grow them all through the winter months. One of the cleverest things I like are these plant supports. So they're just little metal bars, and they're probably about 5-6 millimeters diameter. They're not galvanized, but they've just got these little circular hoops, centimeter diameter, at about 3-foot intervals on the way up, and then they've got the loop at the top, and you can pull them out, I think, to any distance you want. So that's definitely one idea I'm going to take back to Phil, my metal worker, and get him to do something like that for me. I might do my runner beans, my French beans, my sweet peas if I grow them. It could be useful for all manner of things. They've made a very wide path here in the centre because the public, I think, have access. But in reality, I think it would look a lot better with a narrower thing and more plants. But obviously that's one of the constraints of the show. You need people to come and see what you're doing. The labels, I think, are really fabulous. So they've just done these little wooden things, and they've painted them in dark charcoal grey, and they've just written on with a white emulsion paint, but very beautifully done. And then with a little S hook, again, this is a nice little design for hanging a label off, a custom made, I would think, for the show. The other nice aspect is, if you are a cut flower person, to have that little greenhouse where she's got vases and spaces for arranging, and then she's got a lovely little shed. And then on the front of the garden, as the finials to welcome you in, again, they've got those hoops that you use for staking plants, and then they've just slotted in those vases for putting cut flowers in when you're picking them from the garden. I think we're going to have so many more people making their own little cutting garden from now on, because the air miles involved in bringing plants over to us often, if they're not UK grown, is phenomenal. To have them on your doorstep where you can just pick them every day throughout the year, or when you go out to supper or to see a friend, what is nicer than to take a hand-tied bunch of flowers that you've picked from your own garden? Although I would never claim to be any budding Constance Spry, I have worked with many top florists over the years, and so I've picked up some wonderful tips. First of all, I think it's actually what you pick from the garden. The very fact that you've got a garden, you've got a much wider palette of plants than actual florist shops can buy from the wholesale markets. So think of things like raspberries, green raspberries, when they're growing on a stem, they look beautiful in a vase. Things like honeysuckle, when they've got their red berries on, wonderful too. What could be nicer? Sedums with their long stems and purplish type foliage looks great. So really widen your horizons. Just look around the garden, see what you think needs picking or would look great in a vase that you perhaps have never seen before. Don't worry about the longevity of its life. You'll soon find out how long it lasts for, and you'll soon develop a good way to treat it so it actually lasts longer. And that is a key point, really, is actually treating your plants so they last longer. Another thing, when you actually give someone a bunch of flowers, invariably they shove their nose into it and smell it first off. So I always think it's really quite nice if you put some herbs in the bunch. Things like mint, sage, thyme, rosemary, just a few of those sprigs in the bunch, and that smell will be so amazing when they sniff it. So that's a lovely little tip, I think. When you actually pick your plants, you want to make sure first off that you pick them at the right time. You don't want to go out on a burning hot day and pick them. You want to go and pick them when it's cool, maybe first thing in the morning. And you don't want to go with your trug, because that's the worst thing you want. You want to go with a nice bucket of tepid water. So you can actually pick them and plunge them straight in, because as soon as you pick the plant, the stems will start to seal over. So if you pop them in the bucket, they can suck up the water straight away. When you bring them into the vase in the kitchen, you want to cut off all the leaves that are going to be below the waterline and maybe above it too, depending on the look of the arrangement that you want. So pick off all the leaves, put just a teaspoon or so of Milton solution into the water, which is effectively a sterilizer, and that will just stop all the fungal molds growing, because if you leave water in a vase for any length of time and you smell it, it does smell pretty fetid, pretty rotten, and that will stop all those rots developing. I mean, many florists tell you all different tips for this. They will say either use a proprietary brand, but many florists disagree with those. They will say put boiling sugar that's dissolved in water into it. So you can choose what you like, but I find Milton the best. And when you actually treat the stems, something like a soft flower, so something such as these Persicaria that I've picked here, I will just literally freshly cut the stems, recut them and pop them in. When I'm doing something like a hydrangea or a woody shrub, they really produce the sap, which just gums it up and it stops them drawing up the moisture. So then what you want to do is get the stem, cut a long slit up it, a good 1.5 inches if you can, and then plunge it into the water. And then later on, if they start to wilt, you can recut it and cut the slit again, put them in dark with fresh water, and they will quickly regenerate themselves. They'll look much more full and full of water and turgid, rather than all dried and drooping. So that tip will actually extend the life of the hydrangea from a few days to several weeks. So they really are a good long-lasting plant. And when I'm doing a vase solely of hydrangeas, I actually pop them in the vase with the water, as I've said, and then I just slowly let the water evaporate. And then they naturally dry. And I've got a beautiful vase of flowers that I was given by a friend about 5 years ago. And they were a beautiful lime green hydrangea. And they still look okay now. They kept their green colour for maybe 3 or 4 years. And now they've just gone to a sort of papery beige. But sadly, because the friend is no longer with me, I really don't want to throw them away. And so I've kept them for 5 years on. And every time I look at them, I think of him. Tulips are always beautiful in a vase. Now, when you buy them from a florist, you have a very narrow range of actually what you can buy. You might have reds and you might have yellows. But in your garden, you can grow a fantastic range of colours of tulips. But what a lot of people find is when they pick them, they put them in the vase and then they all droop. So what you want to do is pick them and then put them in a bucket of water, tepid water, overnight with newspaper wrapped right around them, just loosely, so it's holding you upright. And then come the morning, you then put them in the vase without the newspaper and you'll find they keep beautifully upright. Dahlias are another thing that I think it's so well worth growing in a cut flower garden, because again, when you buy them commercially, you have a very limited range. But if you grow them here, you've got beautiful ones like the dinner plate dahlias. I think it's blackjack with the lovely dark magenta flowers. I grow Thomas Edison with the beautiful big flowers. Bishop of Canterbury with the small single flowers. All manner of colours you can get, and they will just grow back and you'll have wonderful big clumps of dahlias for years to come. So I think they're a brilliant plant to grow for your cut flower garden. So whatever you do with cut flowers, I think the one top tip of all is make sure your secateurs or your scissors are really, really sharp, so you have a good sharp cut to the base.